Hello guys, and welcome back to our channel. Now I welcome you to today's discussion on the alarming news coming out of Nebraska, the state heavily reliant on agriculture, which is facing a financial crisis that's leaving many farmers on the brink of bankruptcy. But what's even more shocking is the reason behind this crisis. It's no drought, pests, or market fluctuations. It's politics. Now, Nebraska's agricultural industry has long depended on undocumented workers, making up a staggering 63% of the workforce. However, recent policies have led to a drastic decline in available labor, causing farms to shut down and livelihoods to be lost. The irony is bitter. Many Nebraskans voted for policies that would harm their own communities, ignoring the warning signs that their agricultural economy was built on the backs of undocumented workers. Now, with bankruptcy looming, some are left wondering if it's already too late. Now, in this video, we'll take a look into the complexities of Nebraska's agricultural crisis, exploring the human impact and economic implications. So with that said, let's take a look at these videos as different people share their thoughts on this. I will be right back.
So Nebraska is about to go bankrupt, the whole state. That whole state is pretty much an agriculture state, and it relied on at least 65% or better of undocumented workers to work those farms. And now they're going bankrupt. And knowing this, they still voted for that guy. I don't have any sympathy for Nebraska. I'm going to pay more at the grocery store because of and they're probably going to lose their ranches to a bunch of oligarchs. They're going to buy up all the land, control us even more food. And I'll bet you they'll hire some illegal immigrants to get the job done. Let that sink in for a minute, Nebraska.
Hey, Nebraska, is this you? Come on up to the front of the classroom. I have some information for you.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
So I know that when you elected Donald Trump, you decided to put all of your apprehensions aside and elect a person who was clear about his intentions. He was going to get rid of undocumented immigrants, which would cause your primary industry, the agriculture industry, to go down. Then he decided to do away with the farm subsidies, basically welfare, that would just annihilate farmers in Nebraska. But wait, there's more. Those two things are just the tip of the iceberg. I was told from a well-placed source that you guys are considering bankruptcy in the not so distant future. They said 6 months or so. So if you combine all of that bad news with these people deciding to vote against you who desperately need health care, they are and will and have voted for a framework of a budget that would basically annihilate Medicaid in your state. Let me give you a secret. I don't know if you know this, but over 341,000 residents in Nebraska are on Medicaid. That represents $3.7 billion of revenue, of money, of spending that goes to the state of Nebraska for health care. And this is not just health care, just ad nauseum. This is health care that goes to take care of patients and then also goes to fund hospitals in a rural state, hospitals that are desperately needed. Now, this is the kicker. Of that $3 billion or so that goes into the state, the federal government picks up 69%. In essence, only 30% of that money you have to contribute. But the problem is, since you're going bankrupt and all, you're not going to be able to contribute that. You have come into the zone of FAFO. Unfortunately, this map is going to be your downfall.
I'm so excited for everyone to call me a bad person again in my comments, but guess what? I do not care about Nebraska going bankrupt in 6 months. I do not care. I do not care. Maybe a few other of those red states should go bankrupt in 6 months so the blue states can swoop in to save them, so they can understand that we are not the bad ones. We are not the poor ones. We are not the ones who cannot survive under crazy policies. But you know why I don't feel bad for Nebraska? You know why? Because I believe I heard 65% of their workforce is undocumented people, which means they're not coming to work anymore, which means work's not happening, which means all the farmers in Nebraska are going to go bankrupt because they all went out there and voted against their neighbors. 65% of neighbors who are immigrants. Okay. We're going to find out at this point. You know what I mean? And of course, I do feel bad for those blue people in Nebraska who did not vote for this. So unfortunate. That's what you get for being and not wanting immigrants in this country, even though they're paying taxes and contributing.
So this morning I ended up on Nebraska Talk, and it was a bunch of people crying, why does anybody care about Nebraska? When we voted for Kamala Harris, when I cast my vote for Harris, that was me saying, I care about you and I want you to survive and thrive. Okay, you knew better than anybody else that your state thrives and survives off of migrants' backs. Okay, and instead of them waiting for ICE to come, they decided to peace out before they could come and get them. I don't know what to tell you guys anymore. This is what you voted for. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to believe it or not, this is exactly what you voted for. And now you're feeling it. What do you want us to do? You want a government handout? That's socialism. You voted against that. No. Sadly, the reality is that you'll probably have to sell a lot of your farms for pennies on the dollar to large corporations and manufacturers. But don't worry, they'll probably let you work there for minimum wage.
Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about what's going on with the tariffs and what's going on with the state of Nebraska, which I am from. Okay, I'm noticing a trend right now of a lot of things. When people talk about Nebraska, some people are saying that their stuff is getting removed, it's getting banned, it's whatever. Okay, but I want to talk about something. First thing I want to talk about is, Nebraska is going to go bankrupt in about 6 months. Nebraska, the state that relies on their agriculture to sustain the way of living. Okay, Nebraska. There's a lot of farmland in Nebraska, and Nebraska has been notoriously Republican for quite a long time. There's only subsets of cities that ever really vote Democratic or anything like that, like in Omaha, and so forth. But the Nebraska, the place that relies on their agriculture for any type of profit, is going bankrupt. One of our senators, Pete Ricketts, is kissing boots right now to the Trump administration as we are heading towards bankruptcy in about 6 months. I'm sure you have heard people talk about it, but I want to make it clear that right now, even though my state is on the decline and we have 6 months before we file bankruptcy, I don't want to hear a single one of y'all getting on this app right now trying to monetize off you regretting your vote. I don't want to hear it because, one, you, somebody who owns farmland, who relies on migrant workers to do all of these jobs because you know you don't want to hire an American because, as you stated multiple times, that we're lazy, slow, and we want too much money. The same people who rely on migrant workers turned around and voted against their best interests, and now you have ICE doing sweeps over here on a regular. And you're running around complaining. Now you're going to town halls. You're screaming. You're yelling. You're crying. You're fussing. For what? For something that you did? This is not the F around and find out anymore. Okay? What happens every time when it comes to Republicans is y'all constantly vote against your best interests and then want people who have socialist ideals and mindsets to come in and fix it so you can benefit and then turn around and complain.
Have y'all seen that lady from Nebraska? Don't worry, I'm going to put it down here. She was one of the ones who came out and said, we voted for this and we regret it. She's one of the ones that's actually remorseful, not one of the ones that's coming on here going, yes, I asked for this, but please don't tell me how it's my fault that my consequences are affecting me and not just the people I hate now. I don't want to hear it, okay? Not that we don't care about them. But this one, they're cattle farmers. And I guess Nebraska is on track to go bankrupt in like 2 quarters. Okay. And the most interesting part of the piece that she put up, and I'm not saying this to throw shade, I'm saying it to emphasize what's up. Okay. She says, we knew that they were going to be coming for the undocumented. And here, almost everyone's a farmer of some kind, and 70% of our workforce is immigrant labor. And while we knew they were going to be coming for the undocumented, and we knew 70% of our workforce was going to fall into that category, we still supported this. And now thinking about it, I'm gonna say it one more time, and now thinking about it, they realize it didn't make sense to support something that went against their own interests and to put their support in something that is now feeding their own demise. And I appreciate her for coming on here and giving these updates and just saying, with each time, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like, in retrospect, I can't believe I did that. In looking back, this made no sense. I did it anyway, knowing it didn't make sense. I appreciate her for that. Because we've got too many that are just incapable of doing that. Just incapable of saying, wow, yeah, I convinced myself to go against my own interests. Why did I do that? Like, that is work. That's self-work. Okay. And that's what we have room for. We have room for people that are like, wow, I now want to look into why I convinced myself to do something that was not going to help me. Why did I do that? We need more of that. And less people going, yeah, well, I'm just going to hold on to my hate and rage and anger, and I'm going to blame everyone else. And you know what? Yeah, I'm going to fight to keep my job. I'm getting a lawyer. Okay, I'm fighting this. I don't care if I asked for it. This isn't fair to me. It's not supposed to affect me. What about me and me and me? We don't care about them. Like I said, they can go fend for themselves. They can go fund themselves. But yeah, it's very interesting. So these states that are already on track to go bankrupt just with the policies themselves, okay? Because she's like, people aren't showing up to work. I mean, whole thing, okay? And then blue states, these cesspool states that are providing all the federal taxes, people who live in states like Oklahoma who can't afford a plane ticket out here for the weekend, love to talk about how this place is a cesspool, but they need our money to survive and to support themselves. Yeah, I am all for all of these blue states holding on to their money. I'm not interested in paying this regime. I'm interested in California independence or joining Canada or almost any other country but this one. And I would love to see how states like Nebraska plan on funding themselves when we aren't the ones putting into the pot anymore. We're going to keep our dirty little blue cesspool dollars to ourselves. How about that? Like, go ahead. Give it a watch. I give her props. And keep it rolling, because that's an area, that's a state where the administration is trying to tell you that we're traveling out there to their town halls. Okay, she's in one of the states where they're trying to tell you that it's us that are upset at the town halls. We're traveling out to cow country and removing our dreads and our blue hair to go make red legislators look bad. That's what we're doing. They wish they lived in our heads that much.
Now, an updated Nebraska economic forecast on Friday offered the legislature up to $165 million in potential new revenue to help shrink the state's anticipated budget shortfall. Roughly $65 million of that additional revenue would be generated over the next 2 fiscal years, largely from projected increases in corporate tax collections. Now, those funds, plus recent budget tweaks recommended by the legislature's Appropriations Committee, have narrowed the state's formerly $432 million budget shortfall to just under $200 million. Now, the Nebraska Economic Forecasting Advisory Board, also increased. For the current fiscal year, how much it expects the state to collect in tax receipts by another $100 million. If the legislature pulls that money from the cash reserve, the remaining budget hole for the state to plug would fall to roughly $100 million. And that matters because the legislature still has to close any gap to balance the biennial budget by its midday deadline. Now, Governor Jim Pillen, in a statement, called the update good news, a sign of Nebraska's strong and resilient economy. He said the increases could help deliver critical investments in education and property tax relief. Pillen and others noted, however, that months of wrangling still lie ahead as lawmakers and the Pillen administration seek to balance the budget while retaining funds for various agencies and operations affecting Nebraskans. Stetson Mashelak, a member of the Appropriations Committee, said she remains worried about Pillen's efforts to shift dollars from cash funds and slash other programs, including several the state had already directed funding toward. "I'm glad the deficit is smaller today than yesterday," said the Omaha legislator. "I still think we're not approaching the budget in a thoughtful manner." The state Senate said she remains concerned with apparent singular focus by the Pillen administration on property tax relief when she said the state doesn't even set property taxes. She sees current budget difficulties as a result of Pillen administration-led reductions in income and corporate taxes passed 2 years ago, but that won't be completely implemented for 2 more years. Now, the latest news coming is that Nebraska, the breadbox of America, is due to go bankrupt in 6 months because they lost millions in money with the closing of USAID and 70% of their workforce left, the migrant workers, out of fear of being deported. I must say that Nebraska is about to face a harsh reality, and it's a brutal reminder of the consequences of short-sighted policies. Welcome to FAFO season. For those who don't know, FAFO stands for F around and find out. A fitting phase for a state that has voted against the very people who have kept its wheels turning for years. Undocumented immigrant workers. Now, in a cruel twist of irony, Nebraska, once held as the breadbasket of America, is now staring down the barrel of economic collapse. The closure of USAID and the loss of millions in funding, combined with a mass exodus of migrant workers, many of whom fled out of fear of deportation, have left the state in a perilous situation. It's a perfect storm, a workforce decimated, industries crumbling, and an economy on the brink of bankruptcy. Now, Nebraska voted to tighten immigration policies and limit support for undocumented workers, effectively pushing out the very people who have sustained their agriculture, construction, and service sectors for decades. And now they're left without workers to harvest the crops, care for the elderly, and clean the hotels. It's almost poetic how quickly things can unravel when you turn your back on your neighbors. People who work long hours, often in grueling conditions, just to make sure your state remains the agricultural giant it is. Now, the irony couldn't be sharper. Nebraska, a state that has relied heavily on migrant labor for its economic stability, voted to strip them of the rights and protections they need to stay. They gambled on a nationalist anti-immigrant agenda, thinking they could push away those who helped build their success, and now they're about to pay the price. And this isn't just a political mistake, it's a full-blown disaster. Nebraska is now witnessing the collapse of its economic foundation. The workers it casts aside are the ones who fed the state's economy. And without them, it's no surprise that things are falling apart. For every farmer who can't get their crops harvested and every company struggling to stay afloat without a labor force, it's just a reminder that when you vote against your neighbors, your workers, you vote against your own prosperity. Now, Nebraska is entering FAFO season, and the truth is, the state will find out what happens when you take away the backbone of your economy. The hard truth is here, and it's not pretty. When you push out the ones who feed your economy, don't be shocked when you find yourself hungry. It's honestly surprising how people fail to consider the after effects of their actions, especially when the signs were glaring obvious. Like, what did these voters think was going to happen when they cast their ballots for a candidate who openly laid out mass deportation plans? It's almost like they were living in a fantasy world, convinced they could kick out a whole segment of their workforce and just magically replace them. But here we are, watching the fallout unfold in real time. And let's be clear here, when you vote for a leader who makes no bones about targeting undocumented immigrants, you're not just voting on policy, you are voting on your own future. You're voting for an economic collapse. You're voting for your own workforce to vanish overnight. And what's truly baffling is how people can vote against their own self-interest. all while knowing full well that the very people they're pushing out are the ones who've been holding down the fort in their businesses, farms, and service industries for years. Now they knew who was behind the counter, in the fields, on construction sites, doing the jobs that others weren't, and yet they still chose to throw them under the bus. How do you vote to destroy the very foundation of your economy? I'm still trying to understand that. And then act surprised when things start to fall apart. Just how? It's like setting fire to the house you're living in and being shocked when the walls start crumbling. Like you can't just get rid of your workforce and expect everything to keep running smoothly, especially when those workers were the ones keeping everything afloat. Now look at you. Nebraska is teetering on the edge of economic disaster. Businesses are shuttering, crops are rotting in the fields, and people are scrambling to find workers who are no longer there. It's almost as if they didn't really understand the consequences of their vote, or worse, they didn't care until it was too late, which is now. And it's just funny in the most tragic way. The reality is, when you vote against the people who are making your economy work, you vote against your own survival. And now Nebraska is seeing exactly what happens when you push away the hands that built your success. We have finally come to the end of the video, but what do you our viewers have to say? Share your own thoughts as well in the comment section. Thank you for always watching, and see you in our next video as we bring you another interesting video.